So a little bit about me. My name is Brian Tarallo. Hi. I'm the managing director of Lizard Brain. We're a graphic facilitation company, which means we do a lot of facilitation. We just happen to use visuals as a way to facilitate our group processes. I'm a certified professional facilitator, so if you're familiar with the International Association of Facilitators, I got my CPF designation a couple years ago. And let me walk through what we're going to be doing today. So good news, we're exactly on time. I'll go ahead and do some markup. So we started today with a do now, which is around center yourself. And if you were here for that, you heard the value of giving people a little bit of time to center themselves so that they can be fully present. We are here at 12:05. We're going to do a meeting startup. A meeting startup is this template in which we will cover the objectives or outcomes and how to use Zoom. Then we'll transition into some global principles for virtual facilitation. And then we will jump into modalities and activities. We'll take a break for about 5 minutes at 1 o'clock. And then we're going to practice two different methods that you're probably familiar with if you've facilitated live and in the room. And we'll do them virtually. One of them is group note-taking, and the other one is brain writing. But again, we'll do it virtually. At 1:55, we'll do a quick process check, and then we'll close at 2 o'clock. After that, I'll keep the line open and do office hours. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to hang out after time to answer some specific questions that you have. So that's our agenda. Our outcome is to sharpen our skills in virtual facilitation, overcome any fears that we might have through the practice, and learn cutting-edge virtual modalities. Practice, 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 okay? A couple of roles. So my role is to instruct. I'm going to share my knowledge with you, and just a little bit of background, which I didn't share. I've been facilitating virtually, I should say, for about the last 5 years. I teach it. Is anybody familiar? Just show of hands, I can see you if you've got your camera on. Anyone familiar with the Grove Consultants? Have you ever come across them? Okay, so I see like 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So I teach facilitating virtual collaboration, which is a Grove course. This is a concentrated version of that, okay? So I'm going to instruct and I'm going to answer questions. I love it because I live way out in Herndon, which is like, depending on the time of day, it's either an hour or 3 hours away from DC. And just because I hate traffic, I love virtually facilitating. Your job is to share your own knowledge and to ask questions. I'm assuming that most of the people in the room have a pretty good understanding of facilitation and group process. And so I'd like you to share your ideas when it comes to facilitating a group virtually. Nobody is as smart as, not one of us is as smart as all of us. Okay, principles, we'll get to this in just a second. First things first, okay, how to use Zoom. We were doing a little bit of housekeeping at the very beginning, making sure that you can see and hear. Right now, you should be seeing my screen. And if not, just let me know. If you are booted out, you can dial or click back in. We are recording this, and this is going to be available for anybody to take a look at later. Please mute yourself when you're not talking. If you're using your phone, you can hit *6 on your phone. And I will keep you on mute by default. And just to let you know, if I do mute you, please know that it's not personal. It's just that I'm picking up on some background noise, and I'm trying to spare the rest of the group from that. In order to keep things moving, I'm going to ask that you ask questions and also get links through chat. And the way to do that is to go over to chat, and I'll just type in a quick hi. And you can ask any questions in here. So if you don't automatically see my text message just now, there should be this little symbol that should flash orange. Go ahead and give it a shot. Just type a hi in there so I can see that everybody knows how to do that. So if you have any questions, feel free to add that to chat. That way I can stick with the flow of the class and answer your questions as it naturally fits in, okay? Ray asks, will you explain how you are marking up in real time with a green pen? Yes, I will. In fact, let me do that right now. Okay, so first question to the group. Does anyone recognize the program that I happen to be using right here? And if you got it, you can go ahead and drop it into the chat. What program is this? Sometimes I get some good answers like, oh, that's Photoshop, or that's some fancy drawing program, or say, yep, Doug got it exactly. This is PowerPoint. The latest build of PowerPoint, when it detects a touch screen like this, it will turn on this draw menu that I've got up at the top. I used to hate PowerPoint because it kind of spoon-fed you information. I really like it now just because if we have a conversation that's jamming along, I can very easily just drop in a new blank page and record thoughts here, just like that. Think of it as my virtual flipboard, okay, or flip chart. It doesn't necessarily have to be PowerPoint, but one of the things I'm going to encourage you to think about, and I will show you, are a couple of different options for your own virtual flip chart, okay? All right, so we're going to jump into some principles. For today and tomorrow, you can either choose to be on cruise control or you can take the wheel. And what that means is that you can kick back and kind of be a passive observer and just sort of soak it in, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Or you can put your hands on the wheel. I'll give you some opportunities to jump in and to try some different virtual modalities. And it's entirely up to you if you want to participate or just kind of kick back and synthesize in your own way. The other thing is we are going to be on the balcony and the dance floor. Here's what I mean by that. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff. That stuff is the stuff that's on the dance floor. There's going to be different modalities, there's going to be different principles, and we're going to do things. And then, after we do things, we're going to zoom out and take a balcony perspective on those things. And I'm going to explain, okay, here's why you might want to do these things in a virtual context or in a group process, okay? So we're going to be on the balcony and on the dance floor. Okay, let me open it up. Now, you can either choose to share group chat in Zoom. What other principles might you like to have? And these will be for the next couple of days going forward. Any principles, or if you like ground rules. I personally don't like ground rules. I find them constraining. Somebody tells me there's a rule out there, and my first inclination is to say, okay, how can I find a loophole or break it? So are there any principles out there that you might want to include? Kim asked a question, will these slides be available to us? Yes, in a couple of different ways. I'll share the slides themselves, and you will also have the recording of what you've got. So other ground rules or principles, if you like. What else would you put in here? Okay, so I've got one, which is ask questions. Okay. Do you need a special screen to do what you do? Yes, and I'll talk about that. So special screen. Any other principles? Do you want to ask questions throughout or at the end? I would say ask questions throughout. This is going to be really boring if all you're doing is listening to me yammer on about this stuff. But we'll get back to the special screen. Other questions, or I should say other principles. What else? Okay, we're going to zoom out for a second. We'll go up to the balcony. Now, that was a long pause before people started typing in their ideas, wasn't it? If you were doing that in the room, you'd start to get a little bit itchy. People would start to feel uncomfortable. You need to let people to respond just so that they can sit down, whatever keyboard, figure out what they're going to want to say and type it in. I like to call it a one-sip pause. Okay, this is why I like that, Kim, when you had your coffee cup up there before. So having a beverage, by the way, this is a soda pop. Sometimes people ask me, what is that? Yeah, but sometimes having a beverage, to give yourself this much time just to take a sip and allow people to respond, that's usually enough time, okay? It also avoids collisions, which is to say, if a few of you had opted to go off mute and start talking, you would have bumped into each other. And you do the, your turn, no, you go, me, right? And the best thing to do is to just kind of hammer through that, push through, and not let that distract. So a one-sip pause can be a good way to do that. By the way, this is something that I do whether or not I'm in the room, is I always invite participants to add to the principles, to say, what is it that we need to do in order to create a place of psychological safety, in order to create a place of inclusion, okay? All right, before we move off of principles, let me answer this question because I get a lot. A special screen. So if you can see my webcam right there, and I should probably spotlight my video so you can see it. If you can see my webcam, I'm using what's called a Wacom. That's the brand name. And it just happens to be what's called a Cintiq, okay? And it allows me to literally draw on the screen. You don't have to use one of these. A couple of options to this. So Wacom actually has a cheaper version called a Bamboo tablet. But in that case, there's the tablet is down here and then the screen is up here. And this is actually just like, it looks like a mouse pad, but you're drawing on that. A few other options is to just do an iPad. In fact, the iPad Pro is pretty good. I say it's pretty good because I have a bias towards PCs. And so that's about, when I say a Mac is pretty good, that's high praise for me. And then I like, if you don't want to invest in either of those, getting a Microsoft Surface will also do the job, okay? Yep, Doug got it, nailed it. Nice job, it's right there with me. Okay, so moving forward, let's do a couple of other principles in general when it comes to virtual facilitation. The first one is to minimize transitions. This means, in general, you don't want to be bumping between Zoom and a shared screen and Google Docs and Mural and WhatsApp and Slack and PowerPoint and webcam back and forth, because there's a switching cost to that. And it takes people a little bit of time to transition from one to the next. Now, having said that, the first thing that we are going to do is actually break this rule. So just understand, we're going to be switching back and forth between several different platforms because I want to expose you to a lot of different things. When you're working with your participants, you want to stick to one platform and keep it there. Ray asked me, are you talking through your own headset and earphones that are plugged into the computer? No, I'm not. I actually prefer to use my phone just because the audio is a little bit better. And with a webcam, you can get some feedback. I've gotten some buzzing occasionally occurs, but I like to use my phone. That's a personal thing. Okay, good question. Thanks for that. Here's another one. So technique trumps technology. Here's what I mean by that. I would rather have a good facilitator, ideally somebody who's worked with Ray. I would rather have a good facilitator who really knows their stuff, understands good processes, has thought through an agenda, knows modalities, knows how to read the room, with a webcam and a flip chart, than I would, with all of this other fancy stuff. Now, I do like to use the Cintiq and all of that stuff, but if you're using a whole bunch of really sophisticated technology, you're adding to the complexity of the process, and it's almost like you're just asking for something else to break. One of the things that I shared earlier is that virtual facilitation is not like a conference call. The connection is not as clear. Connections get lost, hardware breaks, things happen, right? I mean, have you ever logged on and then Microsoft has helpfully said, hey, we're gonna restart your computer and send you updates, and it's gonna take 90 minutes. You're gonna be late to whatever it is that you thought you were gonna be doing, right? So I would rather go simple, start basic, and this could be something as simple as like an iPhone with a gooseneck clamp aimed at a clipboard versus something like this, which is actually, this is the setup that I'm using right now, okay? So start basic. Okay, we're gonna do our first transition. And what that means is I'm gonna invite you to join me on another platform which is called Mural. Now, just a little bit about Mural while I'm getting this queued up. Mural, you could think of it as a virtual whiteboard. Now, just because there's going to be a transition to this, just expect this to be a little bit rocky as folks are coming in. And if you can find the chat, here we are. If you can find the chat, I'm posting in the link right now. Now, it may ask you to drop in your name or email. You really don't need to do that. All you have to do is just jump into it, okay? And as soon as you're there, I'll be able to see about how many people we've got. But as soon as you're there, we'll go ahead and do our first modality. Yeah. If anybody's having a problem, just let me know. Okay, I'm starting to see you join. That's great. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice is there's going to be a lot of different cursors zipping around on Mural, okay? And the way that you can minimize that, if you're like me and an introvert and you get kind of overwhelmed by sensory information a little bit fast, the best way you can do that is to mouse over yourself, which is a little icon at the bottom of the screen. Just mouse over that and you can click Hide Cursors, okay? Now, a little bit of orientation to Mural. Let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to, this may be a little bit jarring, but I'm going to pull everybody over to my view. So what Mural is, it's a digital whiteboard tool, or if you like, a sticky wall that allows you to collaborate with remote teammates. So go ahead and practice by creating a sticky. Click anywhere on the screen. You may have to double click, and just create a sticky, and any note that you want to have. There you go. Okay. So practice creating some sticky notes. All right, very nice. Okay, some of you already jumped, Shayna, you're already jumping into it, which is great. So once you're comfortable creating sticky notes, here's what I'd like you to do. Create a sticky note with your name on it, and I'll model this right next to the instructions. Create a sticky with your name on it, like that. And then whatever it is you call yourself. And then once you've got that sticky note, go ahead and drag it to the table as if we were seated around this big kind of U-shaped boardroom table in any order.
Brian, this is Kim. I'm a little stuck here. I don't think I'm getting a sticky note. What could you say again how to do that? Oh, you do it on the right. Sorry. Okay.
Got it. Very nice. You can do it on the right. There is that menu that's over there. You can also just, if you're, I'm not really sure what it is with the Mac, but if you double click anywhere on the screen, it should just create one for you automatically. So Doug, I'm gonna move some of these around just so that it works. Doug, I'm gonna pull you over here. Ray, I'm gonna pull you out here as if we were on the outside of this table. Okay.
Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so
I can hear you perfectly.
Mac, but I'm on a Mac, but I don't see my yellow sticky coming up. I seem to be getting yellow dots.
Okay. Let's see. And what are you typing on those?
What?
When you're creating a yellow dot, what are you typing?
I'm just double clicking and I get a yellow dot, not a sticky.
Okay. So here's what I'd like you to try. Okay. On the left side, there should be a gray menu bar. And there's one that it looks like a sticky note with a folded corner. Go ahead and click on that.
Okay.
And then select 3x3 sticky note. And what you can do is actually drag from that menu over to the middle of wherever it is you want to put it. Okay. Okay. And that'll guarantee that you have the right form. Okay.
And now how do I make it? And then I just make it bigger because mine is tiny.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so what you can do is you can zoom out. That makes things easy. And you can zoom out a couple of ways. You can use the navigator that's at the lower right to zoom in and out. Okay. And the further out you are, the bigger the sticky note you'll create. The other thing you can do is after you've created the sticky note, you can grab the lower right-hand corner and stretch it one way or the other. And because ideally you've chosen the 3x3 sticky note, it'll stay square no matter what you do. Now, for those of you that have finished, go ahead and do the next thing, which is to create another sticky note and add it to the sticky wall on the far right. And what I'm looking for here is your outcome. So this could be the outcome that you wrote for yourself, or it's just one thing that you'd like to get out of this class that you don't mind sharing. Lisa asks, how can we delete a sticky note? So there's a yellow one that's right in the center. I'll demonstrate. All you got to do is select it and then hit the delete key on your keyboard. You can also right-click on it and select delete from the drop-down menu that's there. So Andrea, I'm going to put you out on the outside here. Okay. And then I'm going to, if you wrote tools, I'm going to move this over to the sticky wall, which is over on the right side of the mural. Okay. Okay, so we're going to, let's make that a little bit smaller sticky note.
I don't know how to move it, but I want it to stay that big.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, we'll see. It's your class. So let me get to that chat. Hang on just a second. Okay, how do I unzoom? Great question. So if you are using a PC, you can use the mouse wheel and scroll in and out. If you're not using a PC that has a mouse wheel, you can use the navigator, which is in the lower right-hand corner. You can zoom in and out that way. And alternatively, if that doesn't work either, this is like a ninja move. You can hold the control key and then push plus or minus. That's another thing you can do on your keyboard. So holding the control key and pushing plus or minus. So Ray asks, so we technically are on Zoom and on a browser at this moment. Correct, that is correct. That's right. Okay, no matter where you are, we're gonna go ahead and just do some light introductions. Now we're not gonna go all the way around. I'm gonna give you just enough of a taste to show how you might use Mural to do some introductions. Okay, so here's the way that we're gonna do this. I'm gonna kick us off because I'm seated at the head of the table. And I'm gonna introduce myself, what I call myself, and I'm gonna share my outcome. And then what's going to happen is, because Alexis is next in line, right? She's not going to get a prompt from me, but she's going to know that it's going to be her turn. So she's going to unmute herself. She's going to share her name, what she calls herself, and then her outcome. And then she's going to go off mute. And then we'll go to Sarah. Sarah will see that she's coming up, and then so on. So it's going to be up to you to keep an eye on the table to know when it's your turn and when it's not. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off. Ray, I'm going to answer your question in just a second, but I'll go ahead and kick us off. So hi, my name is Brian. I'm a graphic facilitator. And my outcome for today and tomorrow is that everybody on in the workshop walk away with at least one thing that they can apply. I'm going to share a lot with you, but I'm just hoping you can say, oh, that's one really good idea. And that's me.
Hi, this is Alexis. I am an executive coach and facilitator. My outcome is to at least get a little bit more comfortable working online and virtually.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Irit, facilitator and consultant, and I want to know how you can hold the attention of participants virtually. It's hard to hold my own attention as the participant, and so I would love I'd love that to be an outcome here.
Keep going or back to Sarah?
Go ahead, Shana. Let's just keep going in that direction.
Okay, I'm Shana Chrysler. I'm an educator and facilitator, and my goal for today and tomorrow is to kind of do what Irit is talking about, but gain practical tools that will make virtual meetings and trainings more engaging for everyone.
I think that's me, right, Brian? All right, cool. I had a little trouble finding the sticky note there. Can I just say ditto?
Sure.
Hi, it's Ray, and I would say ditto, and really just wanted to see all of your faces. And my main issue is wanting to get this kind of training out in the world to a lot of people.
Hey, this is Sarah. I think I figured it out.
That's great, Sarah. Do you see where you are on the table now?
Yeah, sorry. So I thought Zoom,
okay.
I was on Zoom and I couldn't, all I had to do is just, yeah, I found it, so. And I would
Awesome.
also say ditto, so thanks. And thank God that Ray said, hey guys, you all wanna figure out how to do this virtually, because I think this is amazing. So just how to get started and get a toe in the water so I can one day actually do a program virtually would be phenomenal.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm an instructional designer and work with a lot of training, but not as much online facilitation. I'm really looking for those transitions between tools and transitions between sections, keeping the audience engaged while you're doing that.
Brian?
Joan, go ahead.
Okay, you sure? I didn't want to talk over someone. Hi, I'm Joan. I'm a facilitator and coach, and very similarly, probably for all of us, but definitely what Brian said, I spend almost as many hours in the car driving back and forth to clients and trainings. So I would love to do more virtually.
Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Dubler. I'm a program officer and I help support leaders who are running an online learning series for the Schusterman Fellowship. So I'd love to get some good tips that I can share with them for the webinars that they're facilitating.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm a coach and facilitator. I work with a lot of international clients in small groups, more than one-on-one. So, Matt.
Hearing a big pause, this is Colin, and I'm joining late. I apologize. I was in a meeting that ran long. I'm really looking to do two things: energize my own sense of facilitating virtually instead of front of the room. I know it's possible to do this well and to be excited about it, and I'm not yet there. And also how to translate a lot of what I do in the room into exercises that can work in a virtual or blended experience.
Hi there, my name is Amanda Roberson. I'm the Director of Policy Research for a small education-focused nonprofit, and we have a large collaborative that we manage and folks in and outside of the Washington, D.C. area, and so I'm looking forward to learning more about how I can keep this very large, wide-ranging group more engaged in our meetings that we have.
Okay, thanks for that. Becca, were you able to resolve Zoom? I don't see you on the call. No, that's a no. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Why don't you go ahead and try speaking? No? Okay, so these things happen. There you go.
Hi, everybody.
Right now.
I'm Becca. Hi, everybody. You can hear me, yes? I'm Becca Youngerman, and I am particularly thinking about helping move groups through conversation towards decision-making in a virtual space.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So congratulations, you've all gotten through your first modality. I don't think with this group I have to talk about the value of introductions. I might just do a light touch on that. One of the things that is always a red flag for me is whenever I have a client that says, yeah, everybody knows everybody, we all know why we're here, we could just jump into that. That's a huge red flag. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, okay, we need to slow things down, and at least some person is not going to know 100% why we're here or why we're not. So anyway, that's all I'll say about introductions. There's been a lot written on the value of just getting to know who's in the room before you get started. Couple things I want to point out about the process. Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't do an introduction and I'm already lost. So
sorry.
That's okay. Just quickly. So you're going around, I'm just like, I zoomed out when you told me about the sticky, and then it took me a long time to zoom back in. And when I did that, I think I lost the flow of where everybody is. So do you see my sticky on the, you didn't say my name and I wasn't sure where anybody was on this.
So I just added your sticky to the far right, if you see that, okay? And admittedly, Susan, I did this pretty quick. Most of the time, what I would do is I would give people enough time.
No, I don't see it.
Okay. So let's do this a little bit differently.
Eight, right? Am I looking at this
so no,
figure eight?
No. So hang on just a second for me and let me get you the right link.
Oh, okay. That's why I wonder I'm having a problem. I keep getting this anonymous elephant.
So I put the proper link in the chat. And Susan, the one that you're looking at was sort of the one to play around on. There's a couple, and this is, you're helping me to highlight the problem with transitioning. is that somebody would get lost and, you know, they might find the wrong link and so forth, okay? Now, if you click on the link that I just dropped into the chat
Now I'm
in
with
Zoom,
you. Now it all makes sense.
there you go.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
So Susan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm Susan Dunlap. I'm a facilitator and coach. I'm technologically challenged, obviously, and I'm being asked more and more to do work internationally and on the other side of the country. So I would love not to travel. So I'm really excited about this.
That's great. Thank you, Susan. And by the way, the reason I didn't include you before is because I had assumed I was tracking with who was not at the table. And my assumption was that those of you that had not put your stickies on the table were in cruise control, that you had decided to kind of sit back and just be an observer, and that's fine, okay? My purpose in this is just to give you a good enough understanding of the tool, and we're not going to do an in-depth, but let me kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about some best practices for doing introductions. This can be a little bit awkward if you're a facilitator and you have good presence in the room. One of the things that we try to do as facilitators is to acknowledge. So Alexis, thank you very much, and Irit, over to you, and Irit, thank you very much, and Shana, over to you. That's acknowledging, and we try to acknowledge evenly. When you're doing that virtually, you're adding drag to the discussion. It's more of a likelihood of an interruption, of a collision, people speaking over each other, and so forth. Okay, and so one of the reasons that I like this as a template is that you know, people can track themselves, and the best thing that you can do as a facilitator when you're doing it virtually is to get out of the way and to let the process work on its own, to let people self-facilitate and go from person to person to person. This also answers a lot of the questions that I heard around how do we engage people, which is to say, give them something to do, right? If they're not engaged, is that because you have a talking head that's kind of like me right now, just yammering on? But giving them something to do, okay? A couple of other things I want to go up to the balcony on. You can use Zoom for a lot, or I should say Mural for a lot of different things. You can use them for brainstorming, clustering ideas, and we'll do this in just a second. Giving people an opportunity to get used to a new tool in a place where the stakes are low, like introductions, this allows people to kind of get their hiccups, you know, like, for example, Susan, thank you for modeling, to understand what's going on, like to get used to the tool in a place that's safe, without them having really a high stake in it. Now, if we were saying, okay, we need to pick our 3 programs and this is all we're going to do going forward, I would not want to launch into a new technology with something that was high stakes. So give them something that they can play around with first, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do next is that we'll, actually before I zoom over here, before I move over to the outcomes, any comments, questions, feedback on the who's in the room before we move over and take a look at outcomes? And you can either go off mute or you can use chat for that.
So Brian, this is Judy. I actually didn't introduce myself because I was on the wrong screen. So I just got back on the right screen. But so usually on Zoom, there's people who use their videos and people who may come in on phone or not decide to use their videos. So do you find an impact from whether people are on video or they're just on audio?
So I have some thoughts about that, but I'd like to harvest from the people who are in the room right now. So if you have any thoughts on use of video or not, you can either use the chat, or I can invite you to go ahead and go off mute and share some thoughts around that.
We have, this is Shana, we have meetings all the time on Zoom, and I would say about half of our folks in meetings are using the video, and then the other half are like in the midst of travel, still want to participate, like they're going through security at the airport. So we try to be flexible, but there's definitely a difference between the level of engagement, and then it kind of precludes or changes how you can use some of the technology in order to keep people engaged. So it's a challenge, but it's also not something that I feel like I can make a hard rule about.
Okay, so it's a challenge, but not something you have a hard rule about, and you have different levels of engagement depending on where people are at and if they're attempting to multitask or not. Ray, did you have something?
Yeah, just two quick things. One is there ever a case where like this can be in Zoom, or are you always toggling between both? And then my second question is, Reed answered it, but I was feeling like a little bit, blitzed by being on the browser, but wanting to see the people's faces while they were talking. So she just taught me how to minimize it, but I'm wondering if you could like just have the face bar of Zoom with the browser so you can see the people as they're introducing each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So let me, and actually before I answer that, so Alexis, did you have a thought that you wanted to share?
I did. I had a thought about the video versus just having your name. And I agree with what you had said about, sometimes if you just have the name, you can be multitasking, et cetera. Sometimes it's because you're not always comfortable with your appearance that particular day. And so perhaps even as a setup and giving people a heads up that our goal is to have as many people visually as possible. So please ensure you can be in an environment, whatever that is, so that we can see each other. So making that very clear request ahead of time so people know and can prepare. That would be the only thing that I might think about, is that clear request.
Yeah, all great. I agree with everything that I've heard. So I face this with every virtual facilitation. Are we going to be on camera, or are we not going to be on camera? And the analogy that I like to draw with that is that, well, it depends. And it really depends on the culture of the organization. It's somewhat analogous to the use of electronics. There are some groups that say no electronics, we want everybody here and present and engaged. There are other groups that say we need our electronics in order to be looking up information, polling other people, bringing in other ideas. So let's use electronics. What I like to do when we hit this point particularly is to go back to the group and ask them and say, would you like to have video on or off? It makes no difference to me. It's entirely up to you, however you want to do it. But would you like to have video on or off? I will tell you that my own personal preference, because I'm an introvert and I'm a pretty deep introvert, is to be off video. Again, my own bias is just that I think that if we're on video, we're looking at ourselves and not necessarily at the other people. Now, there is an advantage if you are facilitating people. So notice just a second ago, I could tell that Ray and Alexis had something to say because they had, in anticipation of that, they had put themselves off mute. And so I could tell that. Now I could also tell that if they were on camera or not. But sometimes if I'm also tracking the body language of people, I can tell if they've got something to say. And some people will just like raise their hands. And that can be helpful for me. So this is a very circuitous answer. What I would say is that when it comes to video, ask the group and say, what is it that you would like to do? So let's actually do this, okay? So go ahead and use the chat. And by the way, I do see a couple of questions in the chat right now, and I'll get to them. Right now, use the chat, and you can either say use video or no video. And let's see kind of how it stacks. This will be a quick impromptu straw poll. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Sorry,
if you haven't typed in the chat, go ahead and do that. So in the Zoom chat, and Colin, because you, I think you joined late, you may have missed the orientation to Zoom, so let me describe it. If you have the Zoom menu bar, which on the far left has mute, and then video, and then manage, and then polls and so forth, there should be 3 dots, and in your case, it should be flashing orange right now. And if you click on that orange thing, you should pull up a chat window that will show you kind of the poll that we're at.
Yeah,
okay?
Got it.
All right, so let me take it. Thank you. Okay, very good. Okay, so it looks like overwhelmingly there's a preference to use video. Now, let me share something with you that I think is critically important to our role as facilitators. Sarah, you were the one person who said no video. If you're comfortable doing it, I'm going to go ahead and I'll take you off mute so you don't have to worry about pushing any buttons. Would you mind sharing why you would not want to use video? And then Colin, you're the other one, so I'll ask you to share the same thing after Sarah's done. Actually, Sarah, I pushed the wrong button. Okay, go ahead and give it just a second to click in. There you go. Sarah, you're on.
Hi. Because I ran in from the gym and I'm still wearing sweat clothes. So I didn't really want everybody to see that.
Got it. Thank you very much. Okay. And then Colin, yep, go ahead.
I actually find it, well, if I'm trying to facilitate all of this that's going on, this is starting to feel like watching the news now. There's the stuff at the bottom and the stuff on the right and the stuff, it's too much. And I think we could lose focus on the conversation.
Okay, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let me zoom up, go to the balcony for a second. I think one thing is a trap that we fall into as facilitators sometimes is that we do a straw poll and then we quickly go with the majority view and then roll past it. I believe it's deeply important for what we're being charged to do is to pause, and if there is a dissenting minority, give them a voice and say, what is it that you see that the rest of us do not see? To me, that's a sacred role. It's part of what we mean when we say inclusion. And if we quickly just kind of gloss past a vote like that and say, yeah, okay, we got 90% of people, we can be exclusive. And that, I think that harms the group process. So here, let me say this. I'm the facilitator, all right? Here's going to be the principle that we'll go with. If you would like to be on video, go ahead and be on video. If you would prefer not to, go ahead and don't be on video. It's entirely up to you. One of the things that I like to do with groups is I like to say we treat adults like adults. I had one facilitator that I worked with. Anytime somebody was late, he would make them do the chicken dance when they came in. I found that deeply offensive. So we treat adults like adults. If you want to be on video, go ahead and be on video. If you don't want to be on video, don't be on video. Okay, let me address the couple of questions that we've got in chat right now. Brian, can you see all the participants at once on your screen? Yes, I can. This gets back to the sticky note that I dropped here as a note to myself to answer Ray. So I called it the Brady Bunch view. One of these days I'm going to reference that, and people are going to say, what's the Brady Bunch? But in the meantime, you can, up at the top of the Zoom window, you're either looking at me right now, or you're looking at a whole bunch of different people, okay? And you can switch that. If you're looking at just me, then that means you're in speaker view. You can click on the, looks like, like a keypad to get gallery view. I prefer to keep it in gallery view just so I can keep an eye on kind of everybody and read the room. So you can practice flipping back and forth between speaker view and gallery view. Pick something that you like. Gallery only shows 5 at a time. Make it bigger. So grab the bottom corners of that thing and stretch it out. And you should be able to see everybody if you play around with that. Alexa says, is there a way to allow people to look back in the slides? No, I've got total control over that. I'm sorry. I can send you the slides later, but no, right now I've got control over that one. Sorry. And then there was another thing. So we had a request. This one was it was handed to me sort of in a roundabout way, but let me just say it like this. Okay, Doug says, can you do the chicken dance? The answer is no. I'd be happy to send you a YouTube video, but I won't be doing that. And then let's just do this. Is anyone uncomfortable? Well, let me say it this way. Can anyone not use video? Is there anyone out there who does not know how to turn on their video? And if that applies to you, just go ahead and let me know in chat, and I can troubleshoot that with you over the break, which is coming up, by the way. So if you're having any problem with video, just drop a note in. Ray says, how do you pull down to see all pictures? I only see 5 people still. Okay. So I'm going to do this. Let me show you what it looks like on my screen. And I'm going to do a new share. Now, this is going to be another transition. And so this may be a little bit rocky. But if I can invite you to go back to Zoom, okay? And that means you're going to have to click away from your browser. Don't leave it completely. Don't shut it down, because we'll be back there in a second. If you go back to Zoom, which could be at the bottom of your screen, if you click on the little, blue square with the white camera in it, you should be seeing exactly my view. And on the left, you should be seeing Mural, and on the right, you should be seeing the Brady Bunch chart. So raise your hand if you can see that as you're looking through my screen. Can you see that right now? Okay, cool. That's what it looks like for me. If you can only see 5 people, it may be that your screen's not big enough, okay? In which case you'll have to share some of the real estate, one or the other. So when I say grab the lower corner and drag it in and out, so Ray's smiling, I assume that means that, that she's figured it out, okay. And then here's the speaker view. Oops, okay, that did not work the way I wanted it to. Let's try it again. Here's what speaker view looks like. And again, I don't prefer this one because this one's, usually on me. All right, let's do a couple of more questions. Okay.
I'm going to do this one verbally. It is like, I am mutually inspired and exhausted watching you right now. Like, you are so masterful how you're like helping people technologically. You're on chat, you're on the browser, you're introducing people, like you are doing all this at once, which is great because that's your job and that's why you're teaching this webinar. But I'm thinking for us out here who are taking this on for the first time, would you recommend, for example, having someone else kind of run our chat? Or, to be able to work up the muscles to do this alone feels like a pretty big lift. So how would you recommend maybe working in partnership for someone to either own chat or own the browser part while someone else is kind of working through kinks?
That, absolutely. So I would share the role, okay? So right now I'm walking and chewing gum. I think as you're getting started on this, especially if let me just say this, I think facilitation is better when done as a pair anyway. Because people share the cognitive and mental load of holding the space for others. When it comes to the technical facilitation like this, yeah, have a tech facilitator and then maybe have a process facilitator. But somebody who can keep an eye on chat, somebody who can troubleshoot in the background, right? Otherwise, that one person is like, I can't, my camera's not, can you help my camera? My camera's not working. If somebody's doing that, that can disrupt the flow. So if you have one other person that you're working with, especially at the beginning, that helps. Okay. Now, Ray, on the topic of mastery. So who here knows how to drive a car? Go ahead and raise your hand. Anybody here not know how to drive a car? Okay, awesome. When you're driving a car down the freeway, you don't necessarily have to think about it, right? You've got maybe the radio on, and if maybe you're talking on the phone, we're going to assume that you're not texting. But if you're driving down the road, you don't necessarily have to put a whole lot of cognitive thought into it. If you go way back to when you actually learned how to drive a car, you were like hands on the wheel, super alert, really dialed in, and you had to really be thinking about, okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And I would say it's kind of like that. The first time you do this, the first couple of times you do this, it's like learning to drive a car and things are really awkward. But the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You get the muscle memory, and then it just flows. Right? So be patient with yourself and the technology. And again, start basic and then get a little bit more advanced as you say, hey, you know what, it'd be really cool if I could draw on my screen, okay? What I showed you, this grew over time. Okay, Ray is asking me about my glove, and I apologize about this. This is a tablet glove, and I think, what was it, Doug, you were the one that also has the Microsoft Surface, right? Thumbs up if you do? Yeah. Or an iPad. If you're gonna use a touch screen, I would highly recommend you get a tablet glove, because it just keeps the screen from detecting the touch of my hand, right? It's a little bit of an insulator. That's what it's for. Okay. Susan, I saw you go off mute before. Did you have a question before we go into break?
I do. Just, are you this whole time, like I'm having to toggle between Zoom and Mural for chat? Is that what everybody's doing? You're just like, so you can't look at chat and look at your screen.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm actually doing a split screen so I can see both, right? That's why I shared my screen before, so you can take a look at that. It's entirely up to you. This is one of these challenges with having the video on. It's almost like, okay, which one am I looking at? Am I looking over here? Am I looking over here? If you're doing this live with a group, I would say pick one means of communication and stick to it, right? I mean, maybe we use Zoom just for the phone option, and it becomes a little bit better than a conference call, but we would be putting all of our stuff into Mural, okay? So having one place to keep things. Okay,
but
before we jump into break.
Chat and Mural.
You don't see where there's chat in Mural? There actually is. If you, and let's not do this because this is going to open up yet another channel. But it is
but everybody
right
else,
here. Okay. Now there should have been something that just flashed on the Mural screen. Now let's not do this because again, we're going to be transitioning around and we're not going to stay on this Mural board. So if you'd like to chat, go ahead and use the Zoom for that, but you can do it in Mural too.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Now let me zoom way out to the balcony. I want to share some technologies with you, but more than that, it's more important that I actually share some principles with you. Because the thing is that the technologies change, right? I mean, Mural is kind of a recent thing. Before I used Mural, I used something that was called Board Thing, and then Board Thing just got terrible to use. And so what I'm hoping is that what you'll walk away from this are some basic principles that you can apply regardless of the platform and the technology. I will pull you in, and I did this thing called summon, so I had everybody form up on me. Joan, I'll help you out with your question in just a second. But I'll have you form up on me, and a summon is to get everybody to say, hey, look over here, right? So these are the outcomes that some of you put into place. And what I'd like to invite you to do is to actually cluster some of these. If you find any similarities, is to put them kind of on top of one another, and if there's any outcomes that are not here, that's a perfect one, practical tools and tools. If there's any outcomes that are not here that you'd like to add, to go ahead and do that now. So we've got one on engagement. And if you've added everything that you'd like to add, I'm going to invite you to take a look at other people's stickies to see if they generate any ideas. So you can either generate ideas, you can, Ray, you're on notice. You can either generate ideas or you can synthesize other people's ideas, or you can add to it. Okay, Erica, thank you for that. Joan, I'll get to yours in a second, but Erica, thank you for giving me the opportunity. If anything goes wrong with Mural, you do the refresh button, which is way up at the top. This is the same refresh button that you would use with any browser, okay? That is the magic button. If anything goes wrong with Mural, if it shows up blank, you could try zooming in or out, but the thing that you're gonna wanna try to do is to refresh. That's like, it solves 99% of all problems with Mural. And it does happen. It's not like a, not like a conference call. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock my time. We're gonna do a 5-minute break, and I'll put 5 minutes. Mural actually has a timer. So let's go ahead and do a 5-minute break, and Joan, I can help you troubleshoot in the meantime, okay? So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. So if you are just coming back, thank you for coming back, by the way. If you are just coming back, so we're gonna do, yet fingers crossed, another transition. So if you feel like you just were able to get a good foothold on Mural, so button up because we're gonna transition to another technology altogether. This time we're gonna take a look at Google Docs, okay? And Sarah, this is the place where you can kind of come back into the stream with this one. So I'm dropping a new link into chat. And this is a link to a Google Doc. Quick show of hands, who's used Google Docs before? Okay, pretty much everybody, okay. So hopefully this won't be too radical of a shift. So one of the things that I said earlier is to have a place where that can serve as almost like your virtual flip chart. If PowerPoint using a Cintiq is too exotic for you, I would highly recommend just having a good Google Doc in there. And by the way, Judy asked the question, is there a recommendation for how often to take a break different than in person? Yeah, I think on the hour for about 5 minutes is pretty good. And by the way, I really don't like to have virtual meetings go longer than 2 hours. People get really exhausted and tired. It's different than when you're in the room. Okay, so if you're joining me, welcome back. I've dropped a link into the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you to join me in yet another platform. So switch yet again. And if you were hanging on by your fingernails before, just like let go, and we're going to do this all over again, right? This is going to be like the same learning curve like Mural. But go ahead and jump into this Google Doc. And wherever you can find a place, answer these 2 questions. How might you define virtual facilitation? And then what could virtual facilitation be? And these are 2 slightly different questions. How do you define it? And then what might it be? What might it look like? And if you're looking at the what could virtual facilitation be, think about some of the technologies that you might use, or platforms, or like how it could actually show up. For example, at its most simple, a virtual facilitation could be a conference call. In fact, I'm just going to take myself off of the camera because, like I said, I'm an introvert. I don't like showing myself if I can possibly help it. There we go. That's a better picture of me anyway. And that way I've got all my eyes. You know that my eyes are on the Google Doc. So how do you define virtual facilitation? And then how might virtual facilitation show up? What might you use that would count, quote unquote, count as a virtual facilitation? I will let that sit just for a second. So one of the things that you all have figured out already is that you have to be careful about how you're how you're typing. It can be really easy to type on top of one another, which is the Google Doc equivalent of a collision. So giving yourself a couple of extra lines just so that you're not typing over one another. Now, while you're typing your thoughts in here, let me zoom out. Let me go out to the balcony just for a second. And by the way, I noticed that about almost half of people chose not to turn on their cameras, which is fine. Sometimes you have to model that. Here's one of the things that I think you can do with virtual facilitation that is actually kind of tricky when you're in the room. When you're in the room, and especially if you're in a plenary session, in a large group session, you get what Susan Cain calls production blocking, which is one of her big problems with brainstorming. And what production blocking is that when one person is talking, everybody else is waiting patiently to share their ideas. And so you're really hearing people in series, one after another after another. In virtual facilitation, if you're inviting everybody to share their ideas at once, you can actually gather a lot very, very quickly. And there's a lot of modalities that translate very well into virtual facilitation, like, for example, brainstorming. So if you just open up a Google Doc and say, go for it, right? You've got the people that are the idea people that can just jump into it and start jamming on ideas. You've got others that will do the +1 and will comment and say, I love this, can I ditto, right? And so you've got some affirmation that's going on there. And you've got everybody that's kind of, they're operating at the same time. So you're recognizing the value of the crowd in this way, which I think is actually, it can be tricky if you're doing this in the room, just because of the idea of production blocking. By the way, the flip of production blocking is called social loafing. That's where one person is talking and everybody else is just kind of, they're sitting back and they're saying, okay, all right, when is it my turn? When is this loudmouth going to shut up, right? Okay, now this one, admittedly, let me just tell you why I did it this way. Google Docs is a lot easier than Mural, isn't it? And I wanted to do this because I wanted to give you something that was kind of hard to say, okay, if Mural is not quite your cup of tea, here's something that might come a little bit easier. So let me open it up, and if you'd either like to use the chat in Zoom, by the way, if you'd either like to use the chat or if you'd like to go ahead and practice going on and off mute, what do you think about using Google Docs as a way to do some virtual facilitation? Impressions, questions, ideas, how does it sit with you?
It's interesting to have a non-attributable way to let people put in their suggestions.
Yeah, totally. And actually, Andrea, thank you for the reminder. Somebody had asked, what's with all of the anonymous animals and things? For whatever reason, it seems to be a convention of collaborative group tools to give you anonymous animal names. That was the same thing in Mural as it is in Google Docs. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Andrea, yeah, so if it calls you the anonymous aardvark, that's just because you haven't logged in, you haven't put your name in. You can certainly do that. I find that it actually can create some safety where you're actually getting some unbiased, anonymous opinions. Now, let me quickly say that you sacrifice something when you're facilitating virtually. You sacrifice the personal connection that you get. You sacrifice picking up on the micro expressions, the body language, and those things that you just sense and feel when you're in a group with other people. So it's not to say that it's a completely conflict mediation intervention work, I would not want to do it virtually. That would be in the room, right? But yeah, if you're concerned about not bringing all voices or shutting out some voices, there's some advantages to doing it virtually. Amanda says, I like Google Docs because it's fairly intuitive. What is the best way to do the harvest? To do the harvest after folks respond to the prompts? Good question. Let me open that up. What are your feelings on harvesting after the fact? Any ideas on that one? And you can either go off mute or you can type something into chat.
I would just say, ironically about the harvest, I love the idea of getting all this information in Google Doc, and maybe this is too complex, but like then getting into the mural and starting to like cloud these ideas together. I mean, I don't know if you can do that on a Google Doc, but it's a way to, how do you visually see where the momentum of the room is? So if you are writing in the Google Doc, like what's our most important goal, or what are our 3 most important goals, and they're doing it on the Google Doc, can you amalgamate those in areas to see where the energy of the group is? Or do you go back to Mural and start like plugging away with that?
Okay, that's awesome. So thank you for that, Ray. So admittedly, Google Docs is a little bit tougher to cloud, or if you like, cluster ideas together. I would not recommend that you would like copy and paste and move things around. I mean, you could do that, but it would be a little bit clunky. Let's do something that's a little bit lighter with Google Docs. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. Take a minute, scan through this, and if there's something that you really like, put some sort of symbol before the idea. So for example, if I'm at the very beginning, right, and I say remote facilitation, I'm going to put an asterisk there. Whoops, let's not do that because that'll give it, actually scratch that. Do it afterwards, otherwise it'll turn into a bulleted list. Do a +1, and what we're doing is basically turning this into a dot vote. So do a quick scan through this list, and then after the line, if there's something that you like, go ahead and add a +1. So Ray, that's one way that you can do that, is you can, basically turn it into a dot vote. Okay. You could take it a step further if you wanted to and have the group suggest some themes. And then the same way that we're adding some +1, tag some themes to this, but that might get a little clunky. I might recommend that we do that in Mural, right? It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Okay,
Brian,
Alexis asks, what do we mean by, go ahead, Ray.
Just one more thing on this point is that if we are people who need like the pre-virtual facilitation training, meaning how to do a Google Doc and how to, because what would be the best way to get some coaching or support through that?
Let's do that in office hours. Okay. I'll stick around and we'll do it then.
Amazing.
Okay. So Alexis says, what do we mean by harvest? So Alexis, that is fancy facilitator speak for writing down other people's ideas, gathering other people's ideas. One of the principles of facilitation is the idea of idea permanence. If somebody says something, we write it down so we can play around with it. So sorry about that. That's fancy facilitator speak. We say words like share, not tell. We say harvest, not write it down. And I don't know why that is. I guess I've been doing this too long. Kim says, I need pre-virtual facilitation on these trainings. Mural, Google Docs, writing on the screen, how to, once they have the tools, then how to facilitate. Okay, fair enough, yeah. Okay, so we actually did something that I wanted to demonstrate. So Ray had asked the question, well, how might we cluster these things, or how might we do a dot vote? So I'm hoping that one of the big takeaways from this is, now that you know the Google Docs exists, is to challenge yourself a little bit and say, okay, if I was going to do a Google Doc, what might be the virtual equivalent to this, right? How could I, using the technology in front of me, if I don't have sticky dots, what could I use, right? Now, the thing is that, and sometimes when we get to this point, somebody says, well, what if you get, and I'm just going to demonstrate this. So you see where I'm at up with remote facilitation? What if somebody did this and they do +1, +1, +1, +1, +1, +1, +1, right? Which is cheating. What if somebody just adds, and somebody will invariably ask me that question. You all are very polite. You haven't asked that question. What I would say is if you see something like that going on, you have a lot deeper problems that facilitation is not necessarily going to solve. And, treat adults like adults. We're going to trust you that, if we say that you have 3 dots to put somewhere, that you'll put your 3 dots somewhere and you're not going to add, 1 or 2. Or if you do have a case to do it differently, then you'll at least explain yourself, and then we can have the conversation around it. Okay, so brace yourself. We're going to do yet another transition, okay? And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to model what's called brain writing. Now, I'm not going to assume that people know what brain writing is. And so here's what I'm going to invite you to do, which is I just shared my screen again, okay? And do me a favor, raise your hand if you can see my screen. And you may need to minimize your browser. If you can't see it, you may need to minimize your browser, or you may need to maximize Zoom again, okay? Now, is there anyone who cannot see my screen? It should say virtual brain writing. Let me do my one-sip pause. Okay, excellent. I'm going to assume that everybody's with me. So here's what brain writing is. This is an oldie but a goldie in terms of facilitation modalities. Here's how it works. Somebody writes down a problem or an issue that they have on a piece of paper. And then they pass that note to the next person, who would then write down a possible solution. And then it goes on to the next person, who writes another possible solution. And it goes on and on and on until it eventually goes back to that first person, who gets all of these great ideas, okay? And so that's called brain writing. And actually, Ray, tell me, I think you did this during your modality workshop, but it was a little bit different. Do you want to tell me the variants that you did? Because I thought it was so cool.
I mean, I think you're probably referring to asset mapping, which all the people on this call know, where you write your issue on the wall and then you travel around, you're like building solutions.
Yeah, okay, right. So asset mapping. So I know the same thing as brain writing, and the difference is that with that asset mapping, you're going, it's almost like you're doing a gallery walk, right? You can go wherever you want to, almost with a little open space. Whereas this one goes from person to person to person. So I guess, Ray, in that way, what we're about to do is actually a little bit more close to virtual asset mapping than it is brain writing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop another link into chat, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, and I'm going to invite you to go ahead and click on that link and join me in what's called Google Sheets, which is like the Google version of Excel, okay? Now this is slightly more structured than a Google Doc. And just the same way that Ray described what asset mapping is, we're gonna do exactly that. So in the left-hand column, thinking back to some of those outcomes that you wanted to get out of this, anywhere in column A, go ahead and write a problem that you've either seen or had with virtual facilitation. So I see colliding, which is to say those interruptions. One person is talking over another, bad connection. Yeah, okay. And then you can write as many as you want to. Okay, you can do however many problems you've got. I may counsel a little bit technology problems. You might want to be a little bit more specific. Yeah, issues with technology. If you could be a little bit more specific about that one. And then whenever you're ready, in column B and column C and column D, to the right of those problems, some ideas for solutions. And this is coming from you, right? What might be some possible solutions? And these could be just your own ideas or things that you've seen today or things that you witnessed elsewhere.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
I guess it's a veiled suggestion too, but I'm curious if it wouldn't work. So for something like Google Docs, where I could see us all colliding potentially, I wonder if before a session you might write down the names of all the people in the farthest left column, so that they have a space to go to if you're doing a spreadsheet or something like that. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's incredibly easy. Yeah, in fact. Yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, I'd like to, if we have time at the end, I'd like to model something that I actually saw Ray do. And Ray, you're going to have to help me out with this, because this is another thing where I have my word for it, you have your word for it. My word for it is a human graph, where you have people line up. Like, for example, are you a carnivore or a vegetarian? What did you call that?
Yeah, we call that where do you stand, or human calibration.
Okay, cool. Human calibration, or where do you stand? So, and was that Doug that said that, by the way? Yeah? Okay, Doug. So using exactly that same idea, I want to do a human calibration at the end. So thank you for that. Giving people a little bit of a space. All right, who is the smart aleck that in D5 said, make them do the chicken dance? You're fired, get out. All right, I can do nothing for you, and we're done here. Yeah.
Brian, do people need special technology to get on Google Docs? Like, I know sometimes when people invite me to things and then it says you need permission, or like you're doing it in a way that we can all just get on.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's really important. So you do the same thing with Google Sheets and with Mural, which is you send, when you choose to share it, you choose the option which says allow people to edit anonymously, okay? If you do anything else, it's gonna make you wanna sign up, ask for permission, all that stuff, right? And one of the things, again, the reason that I like Mural so much is that people can kind of seamlessly enter into it without creating an account. Especially if you're doing transitions, if you're going from one platform to another, you want that transition to be as seamless as possible. People don't have to put in their name, email address, social security number, blood type, you know. You want it to be as simple as possible for folks.
Yeah, I just want to offer, I just want to offer one more thing that's coming up for me in terms of goals for this and moving forward. I think one of my goals for virtual facilitation is 100% participation, no matter what that means, unless of course there's 200 people on the call. And what I like about these ones that you're doing, certainly with Google Docs, is it is a way to maximize the chance of everyone being engaged and writing something down. And then also you don't have to have a scribe for the call. It's all there. These are your minutes, because we record these calls, but how many people really listen to them after the fact? So you've now created collectively the minutes of this call that can be distributed to people who missed it or being used as action planning moving forward.
I heartily agree with that, 110%. One thing that I would say is that it may not be 100% participation. It would be an opportunity for 100% participation. If people choose to check out, that's on them. But if you give them the modality, the activity, whatever it is, to allow everyone to be engaged and to be sharing their ideas, and if they choose to opt out of that, then that's on them. But I think it's our job to at least give everybody the opportunity. Second thing is, when it comes to scribing, I could not agree more. One of the things that I've just been trying to do with my own facilitation practice, whether it's in the room or in person, is to remove myself as a bottleneck. Right? If I don't know if you've ever found yourself in this place where, you know, maybe you're up in front of the wall and somebody's like reading a sticky note and they hand it to you and you say, okay, and where does this go? And all that. And it really kind of drags down the process, right? If you're physically handing each one of these sticky notes up to a space. I like to get out of the way of that. I like to be hands off rather. To say, why don't you all go ahead and post these wherever you want it to, and then if you find any natural clusters, go ahead and put them together. And if a couple of people kind of spin off and use it as an opportunity to have an offline conversation, well, that's goodness, because treating adults like adults, I'm going to trust that they're having the conversation that is the most important conversation that they could be having, right? Anyway, right to your point, I've been trying to just personally extract myself as a bottleneck to a group process, setting it up and then getting it out of the way. Alexis, you went off mute for a second. Did you have a thought that you wanted to share on that?
Yeah, another thing, and I didn't put it in here in the suggestions in the Google Docs, but Zoom has a capability to do breakout groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another cool thing. Like, I was in a training, it's through Coaches Rising, and I have 200 plus people. And so they asked a question and then they assigned people to breakout groups and then they came back. Some people chose not to accept the breakout group, and then the facilitator doing that. But I like the idea of doing the breakout groups.
Okay, love it. So thanks for that. And actually, we're doing great on time. I think I'd like to actually model what that looks like. If
Brian,
would that be all right with you? Just because it is such a cool feature of Zoom.
Sorry, just
go ahead, Reed.
Before we moved off this, I wanted to, I guess, like ask a question and then maybe offer a comment or see if you've done this before. So I think part of what I'm struggling with these Google Docs is the lack of organization of where I as a participant actually type, and it's almost turning me off. I guess I'm on the balcony now. It's like turning me off from even participating, knowing that maybe the rest of the group will participate. And I'm curious if, in order to satisfy dual purposes, my own, but I know there was some, you know, echoing of this desire in terms of how to hold people's attention and how to organize a Google Doc, whether it's a spreadsheet or Word document, is by providing or assigning numbers to people. So obviously that won't work if there are hundreds of people, but if we're facilitating or teaching a class of, let's say, 20, if everyone has a preset number and you choose to use a sheet and my number is 5, I can only write in line number 5. And if we use the Word document and my number is 5, you would preset 1 through 20, let's say, and I can only write in that line number 5. I don't know if you've done that before or even thought about that, or if it's just my micromanagement that's like on steroids right now, trying to understand how to kind of organize a little better.
Yeah, well, so Ari, before we do anything else, let me just say thank you for, you know, sharing something that was coming up for you. Is anybody else feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now? Just, you know, is it too much stuff? Is it kind of hanging on? Yeah, Shane, a little bit. Yeah, so I'm going to have you recall what it was like the first time you tried to drive a car. It can be a little nerve-wracking, right? There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of things to think about, and it's not natural at first. Now, Ari, specifically to your idea around assigning numbers, I haven't personally done that. And again, this is just my own personal facilitation style. I'm good with chaos, and I try to prep my participants so that they're a little bit okay with chaos. I like to think of it as murmuration, which is a fancy word. If you've ever seen starlings in flight, somehow they can all sort of move together and not slam into each other, right? But again, having said that, if you've got people that is like, whoa, this is too much stuff, you know, it's too overwhelming, then yeah, you're going to want to think about what you can do to alleviate that. I think what you're getting at is something that is more personality and culturally driven. Okay, there are some groups that they would look at this and they'd say, well, this is way too much. And then I have other clients that look at this and say, well, okay, this is pretty basic. Can you do anything that's a little bit more interesting? Can you do something that's a little bit edgier, something that we haven't seen before? To which case I say, sure, let's do this in virtual reality, right? And sometimes we'll meet each other at actually a VR space, all drawing in a 3D space. Now, I'm not going to cover that here because that is way out in terms of what most groups are used to, right? But I think it is incumbent on you, the facilitator, to get a good read on your participants and especially their culture to say, how much can I push them, okay? If you're keeping them squarely in their place of comfort, then there's a possibility that they may not have any extraordinary conversations. There's a possibility that they may have the same conversations that they've always had, okay? So I do think it's your job to push the envelope just a little bit. However, if you push the envelope too hard, you break the envelope and people freak out and, you know, they get uncomfortable and they resist the process. You don't want to have that either. I think it's really important for you as a facilitator to take a look at your participants and say, okay, where is the envelope of this group's culture? How far can I push them without being disruptive? Okay, and again, I want to thank you for sharing that. Okay, so any other thoughts on brainwriting, or what was the word that we used for it, asset mapping, before we move on and try something else? Thoughts, reflections?
Brian.
So Jane asks, if you sign, I'll get it to a second. If you sign it into a Google Docs account, will your real name show up? Yes, it will show up, I think. Let me double check that one. Okay, yes, ma'am, I heard a question. Susan, was that you?
Oh, yes. So this might be a really stupid question, but I told you I'm technologically challenged. So what I'm trying to figure out, because my virtual facilitations have involved Zoom, where I have my slides, I have the participants, and I'm talking back and forth. I can put them in these breakouts. Are you suggesting, like, am I assuming I'm in a Zoom and that I want to then do a brainstorming, and then I flip the group to this? Is that how this is being used?
Yeah, that you would do a transition. Now, let's make it even simpler than that, okay? If you wanted to do a brainstorm, it may be just, and let's assume that you're already using PowerPoint, right? You're sharing your slides.
Yeah.
What you could do is to ask a question and simply pose it in chat and say, go ahead and give me your answers in chat. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly fine way to do it. I'll even go more low tech than that. What you could do is you could have a flip chart right there next to you. And using your webcam, you know, just record on the flip chart. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Go basic and then go big, right? But start with what you know and figure out what is the way that you can translate what you would do in the room into the virtual space.
And so Mural, what we did first is that's an adjunct to Zoom too. These are all like adjuncts to doing your normal presentation on Zoom. Is that right?
I would say yes and. Let's say that I had, and by the way, I noticed that you're using the word presentation, right? So I'm assuming that you have something of an instructor role, like there's some communicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, but it's usually very interactive, so yes.
Okay, peace.
Yeah.
So in that case, just to minimize the amount of disruption, I would actually keep everything in Mural. That's just me. That's my own preference. But I actually don't. And the reason I wanted to do PowerPoint and Mural is just to show you some different ways that you might use PowerPoint if you wanted to. Try to minimize transitions. We've been doing a lot of transitions. You can tell it's been a little bit rocky, right? So yeah, try to keep it in one.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
So would you ever, so would you ever do Mural only and then like a conference call? Like, is there a voice element to Mural? Or would you do a conference?
There's not a voice element to Mural.
Okay.
In which case, if I did want to do the voice, then I would do probably Zoom for voice and then Mural for the visual, okay? Now, there's other things that you can do with Mural because, by the way, Mural doesn't have to be live. So you can put something out there and then say, hey, you know, weigh into this whenever you want to, or Google Docs or Google Sheet or anything else. Just go ahead and weigh in whenever you want to and add your thoughts, okay? But yeah, since it doesn't have a voice component to it, you would want to bring in some voice component, assuming you wanted to have that level of verbal interaction with folks. Okay. All right. So we're going to do another transition, our last transition of the day. And I'm going to invite you to come back to Mural. Alexa says she likes my puppy. Yeah, that's another thing about virtual facilitation. You know, you have your puppy or anything that brings you joy. It's right there. So go ahead and come back into Mural, and you can either do that. I'm sharing my screen just so that it's on the recording. But go ahead and take a look at it in your web browser so that you can be actively engaged with this. Okay. Now here's what you could do. Let me give you a couple of options. Bear with me for just a second. What you could do with this is that it's very easy to copy and paste data into Mural. So for example, I have everybody on the call, I have your list of names. And it's just in a Google Sheet that I've been using to track, you know, who's in and who's not. I copied the column, and if I just go back into Mural and if I hit paste like that, you get this, which is pretty cool, right? And so what you might do on the topic of breakouts is to say, if there is a cluster of outcomes that you have some particular energy around, go ahead and grab your name and, you know, put it next to the cluster that you have some energy around. So for example, if Ray is really interested in the engagement piece, you might drag her name over there and so forth. Okay. Kim, could you tell me what you mean by do-over?
I wasn't sure where did you just pull those stickies up from?
I have a Google Sheet where I'm tracking, you know, just who's in, what your email address is. So and it could be anything. It could be a list that you've got in a notepad or a Word doc. But as long as it's separated by returns and new lines, when you hit paste, it'll give you a cluster of stickies just like that, which is pretty cool if you're bringing in outside information.
In one sheet too.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, this is Judy. I have a question. So one of the things about, I'm seeing it on Mural, but I think it's true on Google Docs too, is the fact that you could start not only manipulating your own input, but you could be manipulating other people's input. Like if somebody put their name on something, I could take it off if I wanted to. So have you ever had an issue with people sort of interfering with each other, not from a good place?
Honestly, no, I haven't. Although I have had, but what I've had universally is that my clients in preparation for a virtual facilitation will voice a concern exactly like that one. And so I haven't seen that myself, but in a case like that, I just go back to, we treat adults like adults. And if someone, if they sense that, their idea has been stolen, for lack of a better word, is to say, okay, well, let's say that happens, and how do we want to deal with that? So Alexis and then Ray, because you both went off mute. Alexis, do you want to go ahead?
I didn't mean to unmute myself.
Me neither.
Oh, my bad. Okay. So I haven't seen that, but that concern gets voiced all the time. Okay, so here's what you might do now that we're getting some a critical mass of these. What you could do is to actually put people into breakouts, right? And say, okay, go ahead and have a conversation with the people who also attach themselves to that outcome, talk about, whatever. And this is where you would give whatever prompt you wanted to, as if you were in the room. Okay, so with the time that we have left, I'm gonna quickly, and if you wanna follow me, I'm going to quickly just create an activity. And Ray, give me the word for it again. What was that thing that we did where we had people line up?
Where do you stand?
Where do you stand? Okay. And actually, let's do it like this. I'm going to, if you follow me down to the lower right-hand side of the mural, I'll go ahead and lock it. And Ray, if you're okay with it, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and give me any one of those prompts. Beginning with the easy ones first, of course, that go with where do you stand. And I just copied everybody's name. So what was one of those dimensions?
Okay, how about I am like most productive in the morning, or I am a night owl?
Okay, so I love that one. So morning is going to be over here. And then, yep, you've already got it. And then night owl is over here. So go ahead and put yourself somewhere on this graph. Lot of morning people. Power to you. There you go, Sarah. You're with me. Andrea, Judy.
Hey, Brian, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say real quickly again how you pasted our names in there? What did you put it in a Word doc and then just hit name and then enter? That was it?
That was it. That's right. I just selected the column of text that had your names. You copy, you go into Mural, and then just hit paste anywhere, and bam, it'll create for each one of those lines, it'll create a unique sticky note, which is so cool. All right, Ray, you got another one?
How about the world is, I feel terrified of virtual facilitation. I feel like an expert.
Okay.
I just made that up.
I can tell. I'm wondering what's coming up for you. Okay.
Actually, what I probably should have done is like to do it twice, is like where I felt, the other idea is to do where I felt in the beginning of this call and where I feel, an hour and a half later or whatever.
Okay, so let's do that. And by the way, one of the things I want to show you is just how quickly you can pivot and do some dynamic facilitation, changing and adding modalities. Right, so I'm just going to drop a line in. Oops. I'm going to drop a line in.
How did you just drop a line? How did you just drop a line in there? What'd you do?
Let me finish this up and then I'll tell you. So when we started, I was terrified of virtual facilitation. And then let's do one more. When we started, I was an expert at virtual facilitation. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that same list of names. That's okay. Why don't you leave them where they are? And just use the ones that I put right in the middle. So we'll see if any, what the vector is, if people moved. Okay, and Ray, while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and explain. So you can add a lot more to Mural than just sticky notes. So the specific tool that I use is called a line. And if you click on that, the menu on the left, it looks like a circle on top of a square with an arrow underneath it. And that will give you a bunch of shapes and connectors. Okay. Now, the other thing that's pretty neat about Mural is that, and Ray, we used Visual Explorer, didn't we, during your workshop? Okay. So in lieu of Visual Explorer, which is to say a series of images that represent whatever is coming up for you, you can actually use the icons, which is to say the star that's on the left. In fact, let's go ahead and do that now. Click on the star that's on the far left and choose an icon that for you represents the last 2 hours. And if you don't automatically see something, you can type something in, and it doesn't have to be a specific noun, okay? So, for example, if you wanted to type the word success, there would be some icons that would pop up that would actually represent success. While you're searching for an icon, let me tell you about this tool, because this little icon thing, this is actually one of the most powerful features of Mural. This comes from a body of work that's called the Noun Project. The Noun Project is something that you can access pretty much anywhere. I have it on my phone open all the time, which is to say it's a quick icon library. So for example, if you're trying to say, all right, well, what's something that represents risk? You can type the word risk into the Noun Project, and it will have like a round bomb, like from Rocky and Bullwinkle, or like somebody stepping off of a cliff, or like dice. It'll just hand you an amazing visual vocabulary. And so if you go to any website, thenounproject.com, or it might be a .org, but it's the Noun Project, and it'll just hand you an amazing visual vocabulary. That might be the one thing that you take from here. I use the Noun Project all the time.
Brian, do they have an app?
They don't, not to my knowledge, but it's a really, really light website, so it works very well mobily. Lisa, I'll get to your question during office hours. Thanks for that. Okay, so take a look at this and let's see how we did. I'm noticing that there's some movement towards the right. A couple of people have moved left in the direction of being more terrified. I'll consider that a failure on my part, but we still have one more day. I got 2 more hours to try to correct that with y'all. As long as we're taking a look at some of Mural's capabilities, there's some really cool stuff. If you see the thing that looks like a 2x2 matrix, those are frameworks. These are visual templates. So for example, you can pull in something like, a 2x2 to do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And then the really cool part is that there's actually been a lot of agile templates that have just been dumped into Mural and accessible to people. So if you're an agile facilitator, you're familiar with, like, for example, the wall of work or a Kanban board or a retrospective, you can just drop those tools in here and they're ready to go. Yep, there's one. Thanks for that. And that's what it looks like when it's there. Let's see if there's other things. Yeah. There's also, if you're familiar with like the business model canvas, that's a template that's in here. So most really commonly used templates which have, I'll say, loose intellectual property around them, you can find them in here too. Okay, so before we transition out of this, and we're going to actually do one more. I did say that there was one more transition. I kind of fibbed on that one. We're going to try one more thing. Any reflections, queries, comments about Mural before I show you one more tool?
Is it, I'm getting lost in it. Like you have your, I'm looking on Zoom right now, and you have a smaller size of the screen. I don't know how to resize it because I've got all of this stuff now. I have us around the table. I've got the sticky wall. How do I just stay in one spot and make it bigger so I can see?
Okay, here's the easiest way to do that. If somebody voices exactly that same concern, you can do this. And if you were looking at Mural in your browser, everybody now, just whether you wanted to or not, now has my view, which is of those the human graphs that we were just looking at. Shana said, how do you get rid of cursors? What you're going to want to do is mouse over your particular anonymous animal at the bottom and uncheck where it says show, or it should say like hide cursors, okay? So Alexis, to your specific question, if you would like to navigate Mural on your own, the easiest way to do that is to click and drag and click and drag. You can use the navigator, which is down in the lower right, to zoom in and zoom out. There's a little plus minus that's there that'll allow you to get in and get out. My favorite way to do it is just to use my mouse and the mouse wheel that's on it to zoom in and out. Okay? Does that help, Alexis? Thumbs up. Okay. Do we need to pay for Mural? No, you don't. There is it's a freemium model. And so the way that it works is that you can use it on your own individually, and you can join anybody else's. But as soon as you want to start doing this stuff where you want to invite other people in, that's where you have to start paying for it. And I think, I'll look it up, but I think it's like $119 a year in order to do that. So it pays for itself pretty quickly. And I think Irit and Shana, and then Judy, yep, I hope that answers your question. Sarah asks, do you recommend module before the facilitation to train people just a little bit, or just jumping in? Sarah, yeah, absolutely. Giving people time to, get used to the technology. We did the who's in the room kind of as a simple way to do it, and we did it very quickly. I would even slow that down that much more. Now, if you're working with intact teams, which is to say teams that you'll be coming back to again and again, or persistent work groups, you usually have to only do a little bit of orientation. Then now people don't have to, you don't have to use Mural or learn how to use Mural again and again. Okay. So thank you for the questions. Anything else before we do one more thing? Okay, so we're going to do checkouts. And the way that we're going to do checkouts is actually using a bring your own device. Now, I don't know if some of you remember, but there used to be this piece of technology out there that was called Turning Point. And you'd have to walk into your meeting with your Turning Point laptop and these big old suitcases, and you'd open up these suitcases, and inside the suitcases there'd be tons of these little like remote controls, right? Like these little keyboards, almost like little calculators. You have to pass it out to everybody, and you could poll the audience. And they were a pain in the canister because sometimes the Wi-Fi wouldn't work and so forth. So now that pretty much everybody's got one of these, there's software that can do that. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to share my screen just so you can see what I'm looking at. But don't feel like you can go off of this. So on your device, whichever device you want to, you can either use your phone, and I'd actually recommend that you use your phone, or you can just open up a new window in your browser. But whatever device you want to, go to the site menti.com, www.menti.com. I'll do that on my phone just so I can model it. Okay. So Kim says, will we be learning doing breakouts tomorrow? We certainly can. I'm happy to flex. I hadn't planned on it, but if you'd like to, actually, why don't you just give me a thumbs up? Who would like to do breakouts tomorrow? Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Kim, there's your thumb. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and do breakouts tomorrow. So you're going to go to menti.com on your device. Okay, and people are already into it. And then you're going to type in the code that's at the top of my screen. If you can't see my screen, it is 602873, 602873. And that'll get you in. And I'm just going to be the squeaky wheel on this one. There we go. I hate this. I don't want to be here. When do I get to leave? Let's see how this goes. We've got about 11 people who've weighed in. We'll give it just another minute. So Menti's pretty cool because you can actually use this one live when you're in the room, okay? If you have some way of sharing your screen, and if it's connected to the internet, you can just come up with a poll very quickly, and just like I did. I mean, you can write 602873 on a flip chart, and you're going to get your own unique code, obviously, right? But you can write that on a flip chart.
And you made up the prompts?
Oh, yeah.
And you made up those little smiley faces to go with it? That's crazy. Oh, I see. How it connects to the D.
Yeah.
By chance. Okay.
Right. By the way, thank you for noticing the emoticons. Does anybody remember this? It's on my, yeah. So this is America Online, right? Some of you are like scratching your heads like, what's America Online? Well, it used to be the internet, right? That's what we used to call it. And if you look at this guy was so proud to give me this. This is like teaching people how to use emoticons for the first time. These are like the hieroglyphics of our day, right? Where it's like, yeah, if you put like a colon and a line and that means happy. Like it's saying if you want to share happy, that's how to do it. So I love this. This is vintage stuff. But yeah, I had to put it in there too. Yeah, Alexis, you're dead on. You can do this in an in-person meeting as well.
And do you have to pay for menti.com also? Subscribe?
No, this one's free.
Ray,
No.
have you ever
if
used
you get to
or a different one like this?
I've always wanted to, but I'm always scared to. So I think this is really going to help me.
Jump in, Ray. Jump in. Do it.
So Erica and I use
you may want to have it.
Erica and I use Poll
Go ahead.
Everywhere for a presentation that we did last week. We had 350 people in the audience, and we inserted the result. We did it twice, one with the word cloud, one with the poll. We inserted it right into PowerPoint. So it's pretty powerful when you use this.
Yeah, and that's the other one that I've heard of. A couple of people have recommended that one to me. I just haven't played around with it. So it's whichever one is more stable and more comfortable for you. Okay. Okay, just a couple of things that are coming in through the chat before we close. And again, I will stick around for office hours. Sarah says, would you be able to send out the link for tomorrow? Yes, it is the same link, right? It's the same Zoom link as you used today. And just so that you have it, so you don't have to go digging for it, let me go ahead and drop it in. But it is exactly the same Zoom link. Okay. All right. Any other global questions before I turn it over to Ray to close? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know that this was fast and furious. That was entirely my intent, is just to give you like a little taste of things. And then if you want to go deeper, like I said, I'm happy to hang around. Again, the one thing that I wanted you to walk away from today is the knowledge that if you can do it in the room, you can do it online. And it's just to think about how is it that I might translate what I can do in the room to virtual. And by the way, last time I said that, well, you can't do a hug online. Somebody said that, right? And then as soon as somebody said, well, you can't do a hug online, here's what showed up in the chat. Okay. All right. So Ray, over to you.
Yeah. So I just want to say, a couple of quick things before we end. A huge thank you to Brian. I'm definitely experiencing a lot of productive discomfort, which is like the emotion I try to create in my clients, but I'm like, my heart's racing a bit, but in a good way. I think this is even more advanced than I am. So I'm going to stay on to figure out how to do a Google Doc. But what I really want to just point out for everyone on the call is, I think what's so important about what we just experienced, and I know I'll experience tomorrow, is not only learning the new modalities, but Brian, really watching you and how masterful you are, how you keep your cool, how you don't get flustered, how no question is too silly or too basic. Like, just observing you as a facilitator in a virtual space is really, really helpful, and seeing like where we could get to. So I just wanted to flag that it's not only about the tools, but watching someone who does this a lot, and just the ease and the fluidity through which you're doing that has been really, really helpful to observe. So thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Okay, I will go ahead, with your permission, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and then we will go ahead and transition into office hours.